So before traveling, you can prepare things in your life to afford to do any of these things. And this just doesn't apply to traveling. I quit smoking years ago. I was a pack a day smoker, sometimes more. By today's numbers, a pack of cigarettes in Minnesota is around $10 per pack. So at that point, I'm saving $3,650 per year, which fully funds any trips that I have gone on. So the first thing that you're going to need to travel international is a passport. If you wait till the last minute, there is the option to get it quicker, but as you can see, it's an extra $82 expedite fee. The second requirement is to find a good ticket prices for flying. It's your single most expensive initial cost is a plane ticket. Research your prices for off-peak tickets. Can get tickets even to round trip to Japan for under $1,000 if you research things really well and you plan it really well and you go off peak. And of course, third requirement is where will you stay, your accommodations, things like that. You have many options. You have the cheapest options would be homestay, hostels or capsule hotels, and budget or business hotels. Those are going to be your cheapest options. And then the hack for that would be if you have hotel points. Now, your fourth requirement, your next big expense is going to be food. Basically, 4 good options for saving money. That's your convenience stores, your street vendors, cooking it yourself, or going to cheap restaurants. For hack number 3 would be free meals. Even at hostels, there are times when they have like free breakfasts and things like that. Hotels can have free breakfasts. Okay, another thing that you can do to save money is choose your payment method. You can use credit cards there in many places, especially in urban areas, but Japan is still a cash-based society, so you're going to need cash and you're going to need lots of it. So remember to not use those currency exchange services that you see at the airport. They will rake you over the coals with fees. The cheapest option that I found is to go to your bank, see what they offer for foreign currency exchange, and use your bank. It's almost free. IC cards are very popular. Use it for pay your transit. You can use it at the convenience stores, at grocery stores, at a lot of different places. The other thing is free spending. Have cash left over, have cash in your wallet, have cash in an envelope, just it is like your incidental money, just have it available. Okay, and then number 3 would be activities. For this expense, you can find a lot of free things like going to a park or a temple, things like that, but plan for some paid activities as well. I mean, you want to have a fulfilling trip. You don't want to just live in your hotel. Next is gifts. So you want to have a budget for this. There's people back home, they expect it. It's not that they expect something, but it's just something nice to do, to be able to buy mementos for people to bring them back. Incidental, like I mentioned, if you need it, it's there to be used in emergency. Otherwise, don't use it. And when you come back to your home country, just exchange it for your local currency. Next, for transportation, when you're in Japan, unless you're in a really rural area, don't rent a car. Parking's expensive, rental fee's expensive, fuel is expensive. Use public transportation, rent a bicycle, and walk. I mean, walking costs nothing. The other 2 options are very cheap. And then finally is communication. You want to be able to do things. Now, you could spend nothing and just connect to Wi-Fi, but you have to rely on an area or a building that has Wi-Fi. If not, you can run the risk of just being in dead zones and maybe needing Google Maps and not being able to use it. So get a SIM card or pocket Wi-Fi and save hundreds of dollars than putting your phone on an international plan, which is a total waste of money. Now, before you go, you need to prepare for your trip to maximize your savings. I start planning up to a year in advance, and as it gets closer to the time of departure, I start to ramp up my planning as deals start to happen. Now, you want to make sure your passport is valid, and if it's 6 months, prior to expiration before you travel, you will probably get denied entry. So you need to make sure you have plenty of time on your passport before it expires. Next, begin budget planning in a spreadsheet or notebook or whatever method works best for you. It's up to you, honestly. I use a spreadsheet. I can track things. I can calculate formulas. It helps me keep really good track of my upcoming trip. Have a rough itinerary and a list of things that you want to do during your trip. I don't plan a day-by-day, hour-by-hour schedule of what I'm going to do. I leave it pretty open. Some days I have no plan. Some days I just decide to just wander. So the itinerary is there, like the things I'd like to do. I'll throw something in there if I want to do it, but I don't pressure myself to do one thing after another on certain days. Now begin to research your airfare and your lodging based on the location. I start to do this around the 90-day mark, of course, and the hotels, that can kind of vary based on availability. Airfare is around 90 days, prior to the trip when I start to make the reservations and such. The graphic here is an actual search that I did for off-peak travel in 2025, which is 4 months from now. This is actually a really good price. It's below $1,000 for a round-trip ticket. Now, to prevent overspending, learn a cash limiting method. This forces you to stay within the budget that you set for yourself. I use the envelope method. It's kind of you can use it for personal finance as well. But the envelope method is you separate all the items that I have in my budget, each get their own envelope. And then I have a daily envelope for each of those items that money goes into. At the end of the day, when I have money left over, that goes into a leftover envelope. And what that allows me to do is throughout the course of the trip, I'm staying under budget because I'm limiting myself on how much I can spend. Towards the end of the trip, I have a excess amount of funds that then I can start to do more expensive things. However, in the beginning of the trip, I'm still having experiences. I'm still enjoying things. So I think for me, it's been really, it's helped me maintain a cost-effective way of traveling. So also as part of your planning, you need to make necessary reservations and then pay those ahead of time. That limits the amount of cash that you need to bring along with you. Things like that, such as prepay. Sometimes the hotels or the hostels require a small upfront fee. You can pay that ahead of time. That's less money you have to withdraw from your bank for currency conversion. There's the pocket Wi-Fi. You can reserve that in advance. Any tickets possible that you need to buy that you can buy from overseas. All that stuff simplifies the trip and saves you time and possibly saves you money. Next, for exchanging your cash to foreign currency, avoid places like TravelX at the airport. They will charge so many high fees. You'll actually lose a lot of money by using them. Use your bank, use your credit union. Do your best to try to minimize that loss. Places like your banks and your credit unions, certain other places, if you do your research, tend to have very minimal exchange fees. It hardly cost me anything to go through my bank, so I pretty much got what the going exchange rate was when I did that. And that's such as getting all the envelopes marked, separated in a special bag, the envelopes separated into their categories, and then the daily envelopes for daily food and things like that. Get all that ready prior to the trip, and it just simplifies the process as soon as you get off the plane. So a question that gives a lot of people anxiety is, when do you actually travel? When do you purchase your plane ticket, and what kind of ticket do you buy? I like to look at it as there's two periods of travel. Okay, commonly known as peak and off-peak travel. Peak tends to be the more expensive times, the high traffic times of the year, whereas off-peak tends to be a lower traffic time, so prices are more competitive. This off-peak travel can save you hundreds or thousands of dollars, depending on where you're going from, what time of year you buy, how far ahead you buy. So when do you buy that plane ticket? I tend to buy my plane ticket around 90 days in advance of the trip. I have bought it before, and a lot of times that was because I was using airline miles. But when you're paying cash, I think 90 days is kind of a sweet spot. The price can still fluctuate up or down before or after that, but I've kind of shot in between that to get the best price. The other thing is if you have a choice of multiple airports, that can affect the price as well. So for example, in Chicago, you have a choice between O'Hare and Midway, O'Hare being the bigger airport, and in Tokyo is Narita and Haneda. I think Narita is the bigger airport, but Haneda is pretty big too. And one real world example of that price difference is when I went from, I had a choice between Minneapolis, St. Paul to Tokyo. The round trip price from Minneapolis, St. Paul to Tokyo was $2,800. That exact same day and the exact same days of travel from St. Louis, Missouri was $1,300. And I could use that as a trip to go down to St. Louis, visit relatives, and then take off from there, come back and continue and do another visit or something. So I could not only take advantage of a lower price, but also use that as an opportunity to visit family and things like that. So you can take those into consideration. There's not just one airport that you can leave from, and that one airport in your hometown may not be the best deal. So definitely shop around, and if you have alternatives that are cheaper and you have a reason to use it, take advantage of it. So the next big expense that you're going to have is accommodations. And you want to, if you're on a budget, you want to try to find something that's affordable. Now, the most expensive thing that I tend to find are hotels, especially like your American chain hotels, but they offer the greatest privacy, the greatest conveniences and things like that. But their average price tends to be anywhere from $50 to $150 or more. It's just that's kind of the average range. Your Marriott's, your Hilton's, hotels like that, they're going to cost a lot. Especially the bigger the room, the more people you have with you, that price just tends to skyrocket. And you do that for multiple days, and the cost of your trip is just going to be astronomical. The next best thing is capsule hotels. Now, capsule I haven't tried yet, and I haven't needed to, but if given the opportunity, I will. They're cheaper. They can be very cheap as well. But while I was shopping, the average price that I saw was $50 to $100. I think they could go cheaper than that, but that's kind of the average that I saw was in that range. The privacy is not really great. There's a little bit of privacy, but your capsule typically is just your door's a curtain, most of these. Shared facilities, but lots of conveniences built into it. So it's kind of like on the high end of the low, the cheap accommodations, in my opinion. Now, the next one is homestay. Homestay can also be expensive, but there are also a lot of very great deals for homestay. Homestays price ranged and I have done this before. I've done a couple of homestays per night. The average price ranges from $30 to $70, depending on the family that you stay with, the area, things like that. And the ones that I've done is $30 to $50 per night. I love homestays. You have a private room. It's family life. So it's just like living back at home. You're sharing a house with a family. You're somewhat integrated into their life just for that short stay, that short period of time. And some people do homestays for quite a long time. Other ones, like myself, do 1 week at a time or so. But there's a social aspect to it. You get to know the people that live there. Sorry, I just bumped my camera. And they can be a guide. They can be a resource. The one very important thing to understand with a homestay is, you're exchanging money for a service, but at the same time, they're not a business. They're providing a service, but they're technically not a business. It's a family. It's a household. And with families and households, you need to respect their rules more than, say, more than capsule hotels and things like that. I mean, you have to respect the rules everywhere in Japan. But with a homestay, that's a family. You're going to somebody's house. You're being welcomed into their house. Respect the rules. Respect them. Next thing is hostel. And hostels tend to be the cheapest type of accommodation. You have very little privacy. Typically, it's dorm style rooms, so you may be sharing a 12 bunk room with strangers. There are private options too. Those tend to be almost like the price of a capsule hotel, but they're very bare bones. The rooms tend to be. However, you do have shared facilities just like at the capsule hotel. At the hostels, there tends to be kind of a community centered around it. So there tends to be things like a community kitchen where you can buy your own food at, say, the grocery store and bring it back and cook it, which is another cost-saving measure. Same goes with the homestay. Sometimes you can do that as well. Hostel prices, I put here the range is $19 to around $62 over a range of hostels that I was looking at. However, the one I stayed at in Okinawa was very bare bones. The mattress was so thin, but the place was cool, totally run down. It was $12 a night. $12 a night just to have a place to sleep. Okay. Now, when I was in Okinawa, I would get up early, go meet my dojo mates, go train, go explore Okinawa, practice language, go do more karate, and then at night come back, crash, wake up, repeat. Didn't need to spend any money, nothing fancy for accommodations. As a matter of fact, that was kind of like a cool, like, I guess in my mind I was thinking this is part of the training, to not live luxury while I'm traveling and training. So next and final is Airbnb. We all know what Airbnb is. Airbnb can be very cheap like a hostel or very expensive like a 5-star hotel. It runs the whole gamut, renting anywhere from hostel type rooms to apartments to entire houses. So I put Airbnb in here as a category, but it's not it's not a type of accommodation. It's a service that provides a range of accommodations that pretty much cover the range of accommodations that I just covered here. So, but anyways, prices are all over the place with that. So you got your $1, $2, $3, $4, and what you get, what you pay for, what you get. There's a hack. I mean, of course, is if you have hotel points, use your hotel points because you stay in a hotel for free. I mean, you can't beat that either. That is what I recommend for your accommodations while you're traveling overseas. Okay, next. We all have to eat while we're traveling. You need your energy, right? So, in my opinion, Japan is the best for this. You have so many options. Not only delicious options, but incredibly healthy options too. One of the easiest, most convenient, of course, is aptly named konbini, which is katakanized for convenience store or convenience, konbini. The most popular chains are Lawson, 7-Eleven, and Family Mart. You have the convenience of a small grocery store inside of here. There's frozen sections, there's take-home meals, there's cooked meals, there's prepared things, there's candy. I mean, everything that you imagine a 7-Eleven. American 7-Eleven if you can, but done really, really well. I do have a little bit of that in an early video that I made, but the range of foods, the prepared meals, the bento boxes, the bentos that you can buy, everything's good, and you can, make a choice between healthy and unhealthy while you do it. The prices are killer. Here's the thing. At 7-Eleven or any of these convenience stores, you can get your meals for, I would say, $8 per meal if you go just pretty bare bones. I think my bento that I bought was 500 yen, which is equivalent of like $3.60. It's an entire meal. I would get a coffee, a water, and maybe some kind of additional snack. And that would be under $10 about. I think around $8 I would spend for all those things. It was low enough where if I did just kombini meals that day, I would be well under my food budget. And so I would take that leftover money and put it in an envelope for the end of the trip. And that's kind of the goal. That was the game I would play, was how much can I eat and stay under budget. Because during the course of that trip, that extra money that I saved would be used towards, in this case, I always used it towards gifts for my family and friends and things like that. Next is fast food. Pretty typical. You got to at least try it while you're over there if you're interested. You don't have to try it, but there's McDonald's over there. There's the standard things. McDonald's, KFC, they're quite popular over in Japan. And then they have their own fast food chains like Moss Burger, which is pretty high quality hamburger actually. The prices are pretty standard. It always seems like it's a little cheaper than it is here in the States. So I think you can do the same. I just wouldn't recommend eating just fast food all the time. Another option is street food. Now, that's kind of interesting. Street food is like street vendors, like your hot dog stands and things like that. But over there, I remember when I would leave the hostel in Okinawa and go to the Budokan, the Naha Budokan, where we did training several times. Along the way, I would walk the whole way, or I would ride a bicycle, but I would stop, and there was this street vendor with this charcoal grill set up, and it was just various meats on a stick. So I would stop by 7-Eleven. I would get myself like a Gatorade called Pocari Sweat, some extra waters, and a coffee. And then I would also stop by this place and get several of these yakitori on a stick, or there was chicken and pork. But I would just get a variety of those, and it was like 200 yen per. 200 yen is equivalent of like $1.50 for, about this much just freshly grilled meat on a stick. So I grabbed a couple of those, and I would have my protein for the morning, my drinks, everything set up to go, and I'd head down and do training. I didn't do that every morning, but I would do that several mornings, and still, it was one of those things that kept me under budget. And then finally, is just going to the grocery store. Just like here, there's grocery stores, in other countries. And I know I'm generalizing for an American audience here, but I went into any grocery store, and as long as I could make out the aisles and the things, it's not that bad, even if you can't read the language. At the time, on my first trip, I couldn't really read anything in Japanese, just a few characters. But I was pretty lost in the grocery store unless I just kind of went and checked out the areas and say, hey, I want this. It was a lot of pointing, put it in the cart, and then just buying it and trying it out. The last trip that I went on, we went to a grocery store with the host mother, and she took us, and it was actually a really cool experience, because this was a very modern grocery store, very high tech, and very easy to get around, to pick out foods and things like that. So it was almost just like going to your neighborhood grocery store. Everything was in another language, but the options were right there in front of you. There was no difficulty going and getting food, saving the money, and additionally, you could just get ingredients and cook back at the house, or cook back at the hostel, or wherever you're staying. Save money that way too. These are the options that can save you money. Okay, with restaurants being your last option is kombini. Not really fast food, I guess, but for health reasons. And then the street food, none of these can run the gamut of healthy to unhealthy. So you have to use your best judgment. So that's all I have for the food options. It's mostly just you set a budget every day, and basically every day I would put that amount of money in the envelope for the day, put it in my wallet, and then I would monitor that. So let's say I set a budget of $35. Okay, so I would put about a 5,000 yen bill in my wallet. And then that would be my food budget, food allowance for the day. I would always go under that amount and still have a little bit left over. And so then it would be enough for dessert or something else, or just put it in the next, that extra savings envelope. And then at the end of the trip, or every so often, as that leftover builds up, go to a nice restaurant one day. It works. And you can live frugally while you're traveling, but still have that opportunity to splurge when you need to. So that's what I have. Everyone, give it a try. If you get this opportunity, definitely give it a try. Next, let's talk about a breakdown for each trip's budget. Now, I've been to Japan 3 times. My first trip was for 17 days. My second trip was for 9 days. My third trip was for 15 days, I think. 14 days. Yeah. And each of these trips had a different purpose. So while I was planning to budget and travel as cheaply as I could, there were certain activities that went along with that trip's goal. So the first trip was going to mainland Japan and then Okinawa and experiencing both areas. I had, I think, 500 total that I spent on gifts, but the amount that I spent on myself was just under $2,000, around $1,900 for this trip. The leftover money that I had that I didn't spend, I actually just went back to my bank and without an excess fee, exchanged it back to dollars. So next for trip 2, this was a 9-day trip and this was actually quite a bit more expensive. One of the reasons why is because this was my son's spring break. This was a special trip that I had promised him when he was little. I made a promise, I kept the promise, but that was to see the walking Gundam. When he was a little boy, he really wanted to see it before it was ever built. He used to follow it. He loves Gundam. And he used to follow the construction of this thing when it was just a pipe dream. When they started announcing it and construction progress and showing the pieces that were being engineered, he was interested in it. And I guess it really spurred his imagination. So we went on this dream trip the year before they dismantled it, because that Walking Gundam no longer exists in its current form. I'm really glad we got to do this opportunity, but it was the first time I did a homestay as well. For my portion of the trip, I actually bought my plane ticket this time. We did a homestay. We had a little bit higher food budget because we spent more time in Tokyo. And then this time we went on the Shinkansen, but I bought a fast pass before the price increase. So the travel budget for 9 days was $410 versus $170 for 17 days. So you see how the price can be different. My $10 per day covered Tokyo's transit system and Osaka's transit system, but the additional money came from the JR pass as well. Activities, my portion was $400. This was going and see the Gundam, robotics exhibits, going to Universal Studios Japan, Super Mario Land, things like that. So this time I actually did a little bit more research and got a better deal on a pocket Wi-Fi for 9 days. Probably wasn't the best deal, but I actually did a little research this time, so it was around $50. Incidentals, I did a $300 incidental for this one as well. Still stayed under budget, didn't use it. And then the gift spending, did a similar situation. This time I bought more gifts for extended family back in Missouri and stuff, so I actually did a lot more gift shopping on this trip for other people. And then spending for myself again, I did $150. Because I'm more interested in the experience than buying myself a bunch of things. What did I buy on this last trip? I bought two Gundam with my son, and they were like $15 a piece, something like that. But I did go to Super Potato. I bought a couple of import games for Dreamcast and the wristband at Super Mario Land, so you can participate in the events and things like that. I think that was that was actually my splurge. So anyways, I stayed under budget on my personal spending and just enjoyed the trip. However, I didn't quite spend that full amount on myself for the airline ticket. I actually had some credits from Delta So I took advantage of the e-credits to drop down the price of both of our tickets. So my airline ticket round trip wind up costing about $900. The other thing that I saved was, I just didn't use incidentals. So those two things dropped the total cost of my trip of this particular one down to $33.85. Way more expensive than my last trip, but considering the overall cost, still much less than I was ever told that a trip to Japan would cost. So I guess I'm ahead of the game, but it wasn't the most frugal of my trips. Now, let's talk about my most recent trip. Again, from 2017 until 2024, I had actually been saving my airline miles and actually had enough miles for another round trip. So I wound up spending $35 in taxes for this trip. So I did use that hack. In addition, we did the homestay. The homestay in Tokyo was $33 a day roughly. Between the two of us, it was like 50 something, but I went by pricing for a one person. So a budget of $462 for lodging was not too bad of a deal for 14 days. This was a longer trip. Food, $35 per day. Still the same thing. Just try to stay under budget and occasionally splurge at a restaurant. Transit. This one was a little different than the last one. I still budgeted $10 a day for taking the Tokyo Metro and the Osaka transit system. However, I bought individual Shinkansen tickets that travel between Tokyo and Osaka and back. And the reason for that is the JR Pass cost had skyrocketed to where it wasn't cost effective to get one. So I opted not to buy the JR Pass this time and just buy individual tickets. The next thing was activities. Budgeted $400, and it's because I seen so many concerts and did martial arts training while I was there. So this $400, I got to see five or six concerts while I was there. Martial arts training on multiple days, and it was just, it was amazing because here in the US, if you buy concert tickets, I might have been able to go to 2 at the most because of these Ticketmaster fees and stuff. You didn't have that over there. It was cheap. Whether I went to a big show like when I seen Bandmate in Osaka, or the local clubs like Hatsurai Wall and things like that, there was no like price gouging going on. So I could see multiple shows and still stay within budget. Next one was the pocket Wi-Fi. I actually did the research this time. Got a really good deal. It was like $4 a day or something like that. It was really cheap on a website called Klook. And there's other things you can do with Klook, but this time I just used it for the pocket Wi-Fi. Wound up spending $50 for the 2 weeks. Smoking deal. It was definitely worth the money to do that one. The next one was incidentals. This time, I actually wound up using the incidental money. And the reason why is because the transit system in Tokyo was more than the $10 per day. I actually wound up going a bit over budget on some days and had to dip into the incidental fund for this one. That's the purpose of it. That's why it was there. Next was gift spending. So that $500 doesn't necessarily mean all the gifts bought for everyone back home. It was actually budgeted $400 for people back home this time. The $100 was actually for gifts for people in Japan, or people that were hosting us, people that were doing something for us or helping us with something. It was so I went to a store, bought local gifts, nothing extravagant or anything like that, but like local honeys, local syrups, like small foods and things like that from the area, and presented those as gifts, made little packages, got gift bags, packed them up nice and neat, and then would present them to the family or the people. And that was the mistake that I made on the first 2 trips, is I didn't do that. Now that I know that custom, I try to come up with something thoughtful when I go over there. And then finally, spending. If you look at this, spending says $1,400. Now, the $1,400 wasn't necessarily $1,400 of spending on myself. It was, but I had been saving out of a separate budget throughout the year to buy a katana. So that purchase I was going to do online anyways, separate. It wasn't actually part of the trip. But since I was there and I was going to Tosando's store, I figured I'll take that money, convert it to yen, put that in a special envelope separate from this trip, but buy the sword while I'm over there, which is what I did. So if we go to this next adjustment, you can see that I changed it to the incidental I didn't take away, but the gift shopping dropped down to 100 because the $100 was part of the trip. That was the omiyage for the people hosting us. And then the spending money, the $400 was actually things that I actually had bought for myself outside of the sword budget. That was things like CDs from the concert, merch from the concerts. Since we went to so many concerts and I got to see bands, I actually used spending money on myself this time, which is something that I wanted to do. I hadn't gotten to do that on the last trips, really, to the extent of a normal tourist. But in this case, going to the shows and buying the merch and things like that, I kind of felt good because I was supporting those bands that I really liked. And so I wanted to kind of like, buy their merchandise to help them while I was over there. Because some of these bands were just small local bands, local artists and things like that. And if they performed and I really liked them, then I bought their merch and I wear it to this day. But you can see that this trip was quite a bit less. It was very similar to trip number one. A little more expensive than trip number one, but I had a little bit more spending to do.